Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Get ready, pal.
Here's your host, Randy Tobler.
As president, Donald Trump blocked overtime benefits for millions of workers. He opposed efforts to raise the minimum wage. As the president said, he appointed union busters to the National Labor Relations Board.
More deceptions and lies as we continue to chronicle the remaking of Kamala Harris. And tonight, a town hall where Donald Trump will have a chance to level the playing field on Fox News because she didn't want to have a debate on Fox News, so he'll have a town hall. Welcome into Wake Up Mid-Missouri. I'm Randy Tobler. There's John Marsh. There's producer Hannah. Stephanie out for a couple of days, and we will hold forth along with you, 573-874-9390. Things going on locally. Last night at the City Council in Columbia, and we have, I said Columbia as though it's the place where they do coffee and drug running. Columbia. And,
well, I mean,
California.
It could still apply, right?
And it wasn't exactly the Hotel California in California, Missouri last night when the room was packed as they discussed new police, I guess, department goings on and some hints.
Check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. Right?
Some hints of what have led to the resignation of the chief and what most of the police staff there.
Emphasis on hints.
Hints, yes. Not much reporting going on there. It's interesting. Lots of tight-lipped officials there, John. Didn't hear anything. The ABC News 17 report, our news partners, pretty tight-lipped about the reporting. Not much there.
Yeah, they said about all they were able to confirm out of the Board of Aldermen meeting in California was, yes, the chief did resign last month. Yeah. They're having staffing issues, and they sound like the only folks they've got on staff, other than the Montauk County deputies filling in, are a couple of reserve officers.
Yes. They mentioned, I guess it was an alderman that mentioned something about miscommunication and micromanagement.
And that's all we got. I mean,
now,
as someone, I'm going to tell on myself here and make myself sound way more important than I really am. As someone who I would say has some insider connections, this has been news to me the entire time. I've been finding out about updates as well as my family, like through the news. And especially for a small town where, details come out eventually.
Yeah.
This is very unusual, and so it's certainly piqued my interest. There's also lots of jokes going around town that if you're ever going to speed, now's the time to do it. I can neither confirm or deny.
The feral cats are going to run absolutely wild in California.
Yes.
So there's other stuff going on that's just fascinating. Elon Musk, a part of Donald Trump's cabinet? Yes, that's being reported by the Washington Post that there is interest on the part of Trump. And
how about director of NASA? That'd be a good fit for
yeah.
it.
Oh, and speaking of NASA, they're going to be, I guess, undocking the Starliner, the flawed Starliner from Boeing, whose shares dropped yesterday precipitously because, of course, the problem, the helium leaks and I guess the thruster engine didn't work right. And so it's going to be unmanned as it returns back. I imagine they're going to do a remote thing, like a drone management thing. They're going to bring it back, but not manned. And those astronauts are up there till February.
Have you heard the audio that was released maybe last week about some of the weird noises the astronauts were hearing inside the vessel?
The Starliner? No.
Yeah, it sounded like a weird heartbeat almost. I think the astronauts described it. But there's just some audio of them trying to communicate with Houston. And just the astronauts going, "What is that?"
That's kind
of creepy.
Builds a lot of confidence in your ride home, doesn't it?
That's the chief engineer on that project's heartbeat being bled through the iPhones, I think. I don't know. I mean,
gnashing of teeth, perhaps.
Man, you talk about, what a terrible debacle that thing has been. And it even rubs salt more when which ship is going to bring them back in February? SpaceX. And Elon said a couple of weeks ago, I'm happy to do that. Not a problem. However I can help.
Well, so that mission was supposed to have 9 astronauts on it. they're freeing up 2 seats so that they can bring these 2 astronauts back. Who do you cut?
Yeah.
And if you're cut, how do you feel about that? Because that would kind of not be fun. That would suck.
Plus it raises the ticket price for the other 7 travelers. So this is an interesting story out of the Washington Post. Trump is reportedly eyeing a plan to involve Elon Musk in auditing federal agencies to identify programs to cut. I mean, I'm this close to making a donation to the Trump campaign if this is true.
Well, Elon cut a lot of jobs at X, didn't he, when he took over?
Well, think about it. He said, you're coming back to work 40 hours a week. You're going to be on site. We're not going to give free, buffet lunches for you every day. This is a company designed to build things that change people's lives that makes money. And if you want to be a part of that, great. You'll be rewarded, but I'm not going to coddle you. I'm not going to baby you. You're not going to work in your pajamas, your flannel pajamas, and your flip-flop, slippy, fluffy flip-flops at home.
Bunny slippers.
And then when you come to work, get, sushi and, lox and bagels. Not going to happen. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, those .coms have gone away from those perks. And I think that was one of the upsides of COVID, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When the employees returned, the goodies, and like you said, the buffet didn't.
No, you're right. Elon Musk in an X post says, I can't wait. There is a lot of waste and needless regulation in government that needs to go. Wow. And wow again. I mean, and I wonder what all of the liberals, all of the NPR and listeners and PBS watchers, and I know many of them, who were out to buy Teslas, many of you bought Teslas, who thought Elon Musk was this liberal guy, and he, because he was more on the left, I think, of center in terms perceptually, politically, a lot of people thought.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. And now he's changed. And I wonder now if now just because of his political persuasions have changed, if you think that, well, if he's really an innovator, if he's a heavy thinker, if the guy has really got a brain the size of a modern day computer, in his little head, that, now suddenly was he right before and now he's wrong? He's the same brain. It's the same neurons. It's the same thinking process. It's just that rational thinking process represents the absurdity, the overwhelming tyranny of the modern imperial federal government. And he's out to change it. I think this is great.
I mean, it kind of makes you wonder with all the, maybe it was sort of a mindset change for him after he set up all those factories, not just worldwide, but a lot of them in the U.S. for Tesla, and then started encountering all the government regulation that he might have had a sea change in his mindset.
Well, yeah, and while we're on that, okay, so I'm on a thread here. I've got to continue with this. Just bear with me. There are some philosophical, ideological realities that cannot be denied, and I just report them to you. I just report how reality turns into action in the people who can make a difference in our lives, and in one way or another, they do. Everyone knows who Kevin O'Leary is. Y'all know who Kevin O'Leary is? Shark Tank dude?
Mr. Wonderful, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, here's what he said about Democrat, blue-led, over-regulatory tax and spend.
And here's the one thing that nobody saw coming, and this is the competition of states. I don't put companies here in New York anymore, or in Massachusetts, or in New Jersey, or in California. Those states are uninvestable. The policy here is insane. The taxes are too high. We put them in Fargo, North Dakota, because 40% of the people work elsewhere, including Boston. So I was, of a bit of a debate with Elizabeth Warren about this, but I say, look, Senator, we've got to move the companies out of your state because you're not investable anymore. You're punishing people if they're successful. You overtax them. You hit them with a super tax. New Jersey, what a mess. New York, uninvestable.
Wait, why is New York uninvestable?
Try and do a project in New York. Try and build a data.
I'm asking, Don's point.
Okay, have any of you either been involved in or own a small business? Maybe you're a builder. Maybe you're a little remodeler. Have you tried to pull a permit? Have you tried to go through an inspection? One inspector says X isn't right. The next inspector says, no, X is okay, but Y is wrong. They're nickeling and diming you to death. And now Kamala Harris, if you have a house, if she has her way, if it increases in value, she's going to tax it before you sell it. And in California, they're going to tax you, and then they're going to give illegals, and they're going to give the so-called disadvantaged $150K to buy a house. And Kamala's going to give everyone, including dear producer Hannah, $25,000 to down payment.
Especially.
Yeah, I'm first on the list, I'm sure.
But will Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and surrogates be able to get the message to would-be workers in this country? You can listen to all of Kamala Harris's take other people's money and give it to you, fleece the man, we're going to force him to pay you $20 an hour to flip a burger. That only goes so far. Ultimately, those guys take their money and they move out of the country, they go home, they fold their cards, they stop investing. If not a community that you're living in or a state you're living in, eventually this country.
Well,
will that message make
those
it
jobs
through?
offshore?
And here's the other thing about that. My father, by the way, is a building inspector and still does.
Sorry.
No, it's good. You bring up a very good point. And he does work. He's in a municipality in St. Louis County still at the age of 80 and does it. And he does work with the companies, and they like him. Now he'll write them up if they don't. They have to. His big thing is the safety issues and stuff. So I understand what you're talking about nickel and diming. I think going back to that clip that you just played from Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, if people around the country could hear it, our listeners just heard it. You won't hear it on The View. That they won't put that on The View.
Of course not.
You will not hear that on what he just said there. Flat out, folks. You just heard it. He said he will not tell his companies, or actually tell them, he will not have his companies put jobs in Massachusetts. They won't go to California. They won't go to New York. They go to Fargo, North Dakota. That is significant. That is significant. And I think that's a very powerful comment. What he's specifically talking about, I don't think he's talking about building inspectors. I think he's talking about the regulatory environment, if you will, and just the way they're controlled, the super tax and stuff like that.
But it happens everywhere. I mean, I was trying to bring it down to the local level.
I understand what you're saying.
I know people that have, I can't say, I don't want to say, because I don't want to get anyone in trouble, any of my friends. People that they've roughed in some work around their house. They had some concrete poured. They put in some pipes. The pipes weren't 6 inches. They were 6 inches too close together because there might be this. If there's 100 million year earthquake, it may cause that. You got to be kidding me. People catastrophize. Lawyers try to make rules and regulations and cut contracts that anticipate the million-year calamity that will never, ever happen. And I'm sorry, lawyers, I love you, but you guys are the ones making the laws, and you think through statutes you control the sinful human behavior. I'm sorry. I got to tell the story. I think I've told it before. When I was running the little hospital up north, the inspectors came in 2011 from the state, and on the behalf of CMS. They cited the medical records department. Now, that was pre-electronic medical record and all that. Cited the medical records department because the shelving around the room holding charts was 11 and a half inches from the ceiling. And the regulations say it has to be 12 inches.
Oh, boy.
Now, excuse me. Well, first of all, why do the regulations say that? Something about fire and what? Are you kidding me? I mean, this country has gone insane with regulatory madness.
Well, you know, and you bring up an interesting point about the regulatory. I mean, there's all sorts of different scenarios. We could talk for an hour about it, and you bring up a very good point. I think the other thing that stands up about that soundbite is basically what he's saying is that if you're successful in those states, you're punished. Now, Newt Gingrich essentially argued that years ago. He would say, those states, if you tax production and growth, you get less of both. He would always say that.
And I'm surprised. I didn't.
And his nickname is Mr. Wonderful. But again, the fact that he's telling his businesses not to go to those states is
Look for opportunities to get involved in America's economic activities, America's government activities.
Time for the Daily DC Rundown with John Marsh.
U.S. prosecutors say the Chinese government did give Linda's son lavish, expensive gifts for violating internal rules and even state protocols while she served as an aide to 2 York governors. We have the rundown of some of the gifts. Son and her family received at least 4 deliveries of Nanjing-style salted ducks prepared by a PRC official's personal chef. Numerous organizations paid for her family's accommodations and travel to the PRC in 2019. They even stayed in the presidential suite used by Michelle Obama in Beijing when son was there. The best one, the New York-based association agreed to make efforts to intervene to help her husband, a seafood exporter based in Queens, export live lobsters to China on that one. So,
wow, this sounds a little bit like the Hunter Biden thing, right? I mean, where people are greasing the wheels of commerce to benefit those in their sphere.
Got a travel voucher for $48,000 for travel to the PRC as well.
She and her husband were arrested at their $4.1 million home in New York. Wow. And she worked for what?
That's a lot of lobsters.
She worked for Cuomo and Hochul, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Something else.
We were looking at the polls, too. Latest polls. These are CNN polls for, call them what you will. Let's see. Harris and Donald Trump likely split voters evenly. Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. But Trump out in front, 49% to Harris's 44% in Arizona. So
that's
we'll
interesting.
Take that.
Yeah, I think just about the time we all thought Arizona may be going bluish purple, they seem to be tacting back to.
And that's a CNN poll.
Yeah, so. CNN. So add a couple points for the Trumpster on that one, right?
There you go.
The polls are tightening, but I think I don't know. What do you think? I think maybe she's peaked. I don't know. I just think she's peaked. I know that. Lots of interesting text coming in. I talked earlier about how with Donald Trump making some noise about maybe starting a department of efficiency and accountability that would be run by Elon Musk, because he knows about efficiency and accountability and moving things forward. I said, I'm this close to donating. I tend not to do that. Only with select, very rare instances do I donate to candidates. Try to be discerning that way. Angela says, don't donate. She's talking me off the cliff. They will, in capitals, never stop texting you.
She sounds like she's been personally victimized by...
she implied that once in a year gone by, she donated, and then she's on every, in capitals, Republican candidate nationwide.
Revenge of the robocalls.
Oh, man. Terry says, Randy, something Kamala Harris and the Democrats failed to consider is my company said because profits were so great, here's a $1,300 bonus company-wide. You can't do that if taxes and minimum wages eat up your profits. I know so many small businessmen and women, and have known them through the years, that are so grateful for their employee family. They call them their family. You sit and talk with these folks. Sometimes it comes up in the exam room or in the, we're just chatting about stuff and what's going on in your life. Oh, man, the company's having a good year. And, so we had a big Christmas party for everyone this year, really splurged, or we did this or that, or what, and then when times were tough during the COVID lockdowns, how many of us talked with small business people who said, I dipped into my savings. I went to the mat to try to make sure that my folks, were at least kept somewhat whole, if not completely whole, so that they could ride out the storm. And the employers did get a little help along the way, some of them, not all of them. But I don't know if employees in the din of the battle of a campaign really factor that out when you have the likes of Harris and Walz just demonizing employers and demonizing business. Where do people think they get their checks from? You get them from the businessman and woman. I don't get it. I just don't understand. Travis says, I think Kamala Harris peaked at the DNC. Well, here's though an interesting moment. Remember this from yesterday? Actually, from Labor Day.
You better thank a union member for the 5-day work week. You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time. You better thank...
I say, you better thank a union member. I say, John, you better thank a union member for your job. John, don't you know? Oh, my God.
There you go.
Okay, and it gets interesting.
That's her playing it.
This is in the White House briefing room, the press room, yesterday. A little sparring between Peter Doocy and KJP.
Since when does the vice president have what sounds like a Southern accent?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Now, that's a lie. She knows exactly what he's talking about. And everyone knows she knows exactly what he's talking about.
And isn't KJP originally from like New Orleans or somewhere down south? I think she is.
I don't know where she's from.
So she would be able to spot the accent.
Oh, my God. I think we ought to call her Holographic Harris. Hologram Harris. She's just an apparition. There's really nothing real there. Everything
Kamala
is
the
fake.
Chameleon.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the thing? Kamala Chameleon.
Kamala Chameleon, right? Wasn't there that song, Boy George?
That's it.
I better stick to the day gig. Okay, here we go.
Well,
I mean, this is...
she was talking about unions in Detroit using one tone of voice.
Is this something that
same
you think...
line.
Okay, Peter.
That she used the same line in Pittsburgh, and it sounded like she at least had some kind of a Southern drawl.
I mean, do you hear the question that do you think Americans seriously think that this is an important question? They care. You know what they care about? They care about the economy. They care about lowering costs. They care about health care. That's what Americans care about.
So
that's what they want to hear.
Well, wait a minute, though. KJP.
Just answer the question.
Yeah, answer the question. And first of all, if you claim that Americans really care about policy, why don't you put President Kamala I was for nationalized health care, including for immigrants, before I was against it. I was in charge of the open borders and celebrated that before I became the prosecutor in charge who wants to stamp out illegal fentanyl dealing. By the way, she said nothing about closing the border in all of this discussion. You want to talk about policy? Where is the real policy of this president and further of this would-be president? Further, they seem to go an awful lot on character attacks, thinking that the American people, and rightly so, the American people get hung up on the character and the bravado of Donald Trump and some of his brash statements. So they love to make it about everything but policy when they're talking about Trump, and they like to dodge the failed, flawed policies, progressive Marxist policies of Kamala Harris. What a fraud you are, KJ.
I care about, your colleague just asked me about, what basically we talked about, went back and forth about democracy and freedom.
Oh, democracy and freedom, democracy and freedom. Let's see, where does Kamala Harris come out on democracy and freedom? Let's talk about that, about maybe freedom of speech. Let's see, let me go back in the archives and think a little bit about that.
And it should be taken down. And
She's talking about Elon Musk.
He has lost his privileges, and it should be taken down. And the bottom line is that
Elon Musk should lose his privileges. He should be taken down. That's democracy. That's freedom. That's a freedom of expression. She's a clown. We all know it, and it's incumbent on us to expose her for who she is. She is a Manchurian candidate in 2024, and we have to get at it and make it known clear and loud and broadly spread across the land. Now, today she's going to be in New Hampshire, as I understand. And is it going to be another handout today? I think isn't she announcing another handout, John, today? I can't keep track of them all.
Yeah, me either.
It's just ridiculous. Yeah, I think she's going to be in New Hampshire, and I don't know what it's going to be this morning. Okay, in other news, in case those of you who were with us last week, the epic rant of producer Hannah went viral all over the social media concerning her.
Viral is a strong word.
I like the epic.
Well, it was epic. It was an epic rant. You should replay some of that. You were on quite a tirade about the changing, morphing, the shape-shifting cones and markers that made your morning commute in through the tri-level and thereabouts down in Jefferson City made it very difficult.
And my astigmatism, among other things.
And it was really throwing you a curveball. Then you said things had cleared. Where are we currently?
The last 2 mornings, it appears there's still equipment on the tri-level, but they've opened that third lane when you get onto 54. So, when I go to take the Columbia exit to get on Highway 63, that's a magical third lane now, and it's really nice. No lines painted yet, so there's still the little reflective stickers, but it's been wide open. No issues to report.
Are you trying to kiss and make up with MoDOT here? Did you feel like maybe you spanked him a little too hard last week?
Well, I didn't feel that way because others were agreeing with me until, of course, I was off a couple days last week. It was the day after I went on that rant, or 2 days after, everything opened back up. So I did.
Maybe they were listening.
I did feel kind of bad about that.
Well, maybe
because if I would have just been a little more patient, none of that would have been necessary. But here we are.
I don't know. The Sunday afternoon headed home lake traffic might not concur.
Yeah.
Did you see the pictures from this weekend? Wow.
Now, Hannah, I would like to think that rather than just a coincidence, you actually are a highly influential regional and now statewide broadcaster.
I actually, while I was on vacation, I was checking my work email, which I shouldn't have been doing. But I saw that we were sent a press release from MoDOT about that third lane opening up, and I went, "Oh, whoops."
The bottom of the press release I saw said, "Thanks to producer Hannah reminding us." Did that.
I think we got sent different press releases.
Civil engineers quaking in their boots across the listening area as we speak.
I was reminiscing though. So I've almost been doing the show for 5 years. Mm-hmm. I think that's the first time that I've had a rant like that. That lasted longer than 30 seconds or whatever.
Didn't it feel good though?
Didn't involve pumpkin spice. So yeah.
That is true.
Wasn't it good though? It felt good, didn't it?
I felt heard. You know, when everyone started chiming in
Yeah.
and the Facebook post got shared a few times, there were some comments on there of everyone commiserating with me, and I felt seen, and I felt like less of an idiot because I was ready to take the blame for all of the issues that I had that morning because I am an idiot. But other people were having issues, so that makes it okay. Right?
Yep. If you say so. I want you to feel better. All you need is your lanes to open up, some pumpkin spice latte in your Stanley cup or whatever you now have a monogram Stanley-esque cup. I was very impressed with that.
It's foreign. It's from Australia.
At least it's not from China. At least you didn't do that. No, this plan of Kamala Harris, she's going to unroll this today. Another, raise your hand out there if you're sick and tired of politicians pandering to you. It is so just because it's the way it always has been doesn't mean that that's the way it needs to go forward.
How else are they going to convince people to vote for them, though?
Am I going to have to school you on limited government and why you should not listen to pandering? Actually, you know this very well.
I do know this. I'm just saying.
To your credit, to Hannah's credit, while we have all encouraged you and you have said you would take advantage of student debt repayment relief.
I think I would be stupid not to. Yes.
But ideologically, you're not in favor because you're an educated, brilliant, conservative-leaning person.
Yeah, well,
right?
And I understand actions have consequences, and the consequence of me taking out a loan is that I pay it back with interest.
Yeah, but there's right. So there's that. That's the principled part of you're a principled individual, right? Okay.
Yeah. But if it's an option, I would be silly not to take it.
I would love to confront Kamala Harris and say, Kamala Harris, you have no principles. Prove to me how it helps to now suddenly want to expand the tax deduction to $50,000 on business startup costs from $5,000, an order of magnitude increase. She's going to announce that in New Hampshire today. And these startup costs include consultants and marketing expenses and everything. Okay, we're a marketing company. Right? We do marketing here. We do digital. We do through broadcast. That's what pays for you guys having free radio and free online and free Facebook and free Cardinals radio and free.
You're welcome, by the way.
Right. Okay. Okay. Because business people decide to do that. Well, okay, you can spend a lot in the pre-start of your business, opening day of your business, right? You can spend a lot. But you make that investment thinking and planning and carefully strategizing that return on investment will not only pay for that investment, but more. What do you think is going to happen to the consultants and the marketers and all of the stuff that this kind of money investment funds? Just like what do you think is going to have to happen to housing when suddenly the money is out there to spend, because this is a spend that the government's going to pay back by making it a tax deduction, the prices are going to go up. Does anyone think that that's not going to happen?
Oh, it'll automatically be built right in.
Yeah. I mean, automatically, if she's going to give $25,000 for Hannah to buy my house, One listener says, Harris is such a fraud. Next thing you know, she's going to start selling. She's going to start selling Bibles on the side. Ooh, a little pithy, a little pithy gotcha to the Donaldo. Oh man, it's crazy. Well, I think that we are in a time when is it inappropriate during a political campaign to be asking those big questions, Hannah? Or are people more just concerned about what they can get from a politician rather than, like you mentioned, the consequences of an immediate decision? What do you think?
I don't know. I think, unfortunately, it's all about a candidate's game and how slick they can talk.
Yeah.
I think very few people, again, unfortunately, actually want to know the answers to the big questions.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Political promises, how they go when the smoke all clears.
Yeah. Well,
people, I would say the majority of folks who aren't as in tune as members of the Wake Up fam, they just care about a candidate's swagger and how they present themselves and, maybe the promises that they're throwing out like candy in a parade. Rather than asking the big questions or where they stand on the big policy issues and their track record on those issues.
Yeah. And style out in front and substance bringing up the rear.
And you're right that when you say politicians, with a little p, it doesn't matter what they wear on their shirt, whether it's an elephant or a mule, right, or a donkey, right, because it's all sort of the same game. Who can out pander one another when it gets down to things? I love it when I say, I'm fighting for you. Well, what exactly do you mean, Mr. or Mrs. Politician? What exactly does that mean? Fighting for me? Are you fighting for my right to achieve the best that God has intended for me? Or does that mean you're going to fight to give me something that I haven't earned? What do you mean by that?
I think there are a few examples, maybe on the state level, but more so locally, of politicians who have backgrounds outside of politics that, you feel like you can trust them with those things and they have dealt with things that you have dealt with in your life.
Yep.
But when it comes to the DC elites, I just roll my eyes when I hear them say that they're fighting for you because they have no idea what they're fighting for.
Well said, Hannah.
Fighting for you.
Yeah, they're so out of touch, though. They don't know what I want them to fight for me.
Well, speaking of state politics, we have a veto session coming up next week, and maybe we can preview that a little bit. level that you can go to a governor's ham breakfast. You can go to a Scott Faughn roast of the incoming Speaker of the House. And you can actually talk to these people, have a discussion. They'll communicate with you, visit them in the Capitol. That's why it's always fun to get together with Scott Faughn, publisher of Missouri Times and host of This Week in Missouri Politics, with us on Wednesday because you were lounging in the lap of luxury in your Ford F-150 on Monday. How was your Labor Day holiday, Scott?
It was great. I was just appreciating my friends in organized labor getting me a day off.
Yeah. And what did you think about the Southern drawl that suddenly Kamala developed in Detroit, but not in Pittsburgh? It's funny to watch, isn't it?
See, that's going to be her problem right there, is that the media has came out so hard early on that when she does things, every presidential candidate is going to have some struggles. You cannot run for president without having a problem and a bad day and a struggle. But her problem is the people that defend a Democrat, ABC, NBC, CBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post, I don't think they have credibility with folks because they've been so over the top. Their hatred of Trump, I think, is his best weapon. But their love of Harris is so silly and over the top. I don't think people are going to let them defend her when things like this happen. I thought it was super phony. I know folks that do talk a little bit like that, and I don't think they're going to appreciate someone openly mocking them. Let's be honest, Kamala Harris, is an elitist. She doesn't speak like Medea. It would be like me trying to talk like Medea. It looked a little weird.
Yeah. It reminded you, though, the Hillary thing, right? When she was running, it really hurt her campaign because she was just viewed as being pandering and being chameleon, and so we'll see where it goes. Hey, so I want to touch on what's happening next week. It is a big week. I think most people think, well, wait a minute, the General Assembly doesn't start till next year. What's going on in state politics? There's a lot going on when they're out of session. Let's talk about next week, Scott.
Well, next week is going to start off with a lot of fun. We're going to do a roast. It's going to some of the proceeds are going to benefit the Jefferson City Rape Crisis Center. The incoming speaker, John Patterson, who, if you don't know that name, remember it. You're going to hear it a bunch. He's a big deal. He's a physician. He was brought over here from Korea by some adoptive parents. His story is amazing. He actually has common sense. He's very conservative. John Patterson is an absolute star. But before he takes off him as a star, we're going to make fun of him all night. So myself, the mayor of Kansas City, Quentin Lucas, Cindy O'Loughlin, Wiley Price is coming back over. It's going to be super funny. And Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman, who I actually give my prediction who steals the night to her. I think she'll be outstanding. But we're gonna make fun of him for a good cause. We're going to honor his person in state government. We're going to keep that a surprise. But Monday night, 6 o'clock, the Soybean Association will be our roast. It's always a good time. And then the next night is the big fundraiser night. There'll be more fundraisers per square inch in downtown Jeff City than anywhere in the world as folks lead into veto session. And then at veto session, you'll see a big pot of nothing happen. None of the governor's vetoes will be overridden. However, you will see it. This is the part that's interesting. This is the part for like a wake-up fan would get. You're going to get to hear speeches. Now, a lot of these speeches, people that are leaving and nobody will care, and it's kind of just for them. It's their own kind of self-congratulatory way to say what a great job they did. However, there's going to be some speeches by folks coming back, and listen to those Senate speeches. And so while they won't bring up the House will bring up some bills and override them because that's what they do, and nobody will care, and everybody will kind of laugh. But the Senate won't bring any of those up. But what they will do is they'll talk about next year. I can't imagine you get out there without some long speech from Michael and some of the retiring folks. But what you will also hear is speeches about what is on folks' minds for next year. And that is always very interesting and telling. And a lot of the things you see come about in January and February, you'll get tipped off if you're listening. You'll get tipped off in September veto session.
Will that preview the GOP caucus in November?
That'll just be private moaning and wailing and complaining.
Oh, okay.
I've encouraged Senator O'Loughlin, just have the St. Charles Day. Schedule a day before everybody gets there and just give them a mic. You don't have to plug it in. And just let the St. Charles people whine to each other. And whoever's in the St. Charles caucus can just sit and moan and wail and complain. And that way, none of the rest of them have to hear it. Because, I mean, no one listens anyway. But at least this way, you don't have to sit in that room and listen to that for 2 days. And a beautiful place down at Big Cedar.
All right. We're talking with Scott Faughn here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri, of course, an insider's insider when it comes to Missouri politics.
Scott, the governor vetoed $1 billion with his line item pen and or pens. I know there's been a lot of talk about that, and there was a lot of bumping in heads between the governor and the legislature over there.
Did you notice which county took it the hardest?
Yeah. The budget stabilization funds, that was something the governor was sort of, kind of a line in the sand over. You don't think there's going to be any reaction to that when they all come back?
All of the St. Charles people will complain, but here's the thing. They all vote against the budget. So the box they put themselves into is, if you're going to vote against the budget, when the governor vetoes portions of that budget, isn't he just agreeing with you? We saw this last year. We saw your St. Charles caucus, the complaint caucus. They vote against the budget, right? And then they complain when the governor says, okay, I agree with you in here and here and here. We'll veto this stuff. They're like, no, not that stuff. And it's like, it's almost like you people don't want to be happy.
Again, Scott Faughn is our guest. He is with the Missouri Times. And, of course, we'll have the veto session, the annual veto session that'll be coming up next Wednesday, high noon, in Jefferson City at the Missouri Capitol. And Scott will also be having an event that will honor and essentially roast and honor the speaker-to-be if he wins his House race in Blue Springs, and that is John Patterson. That'll be coming up on Monday. Scott, I want to ask you, and I know you've touched on this, but I'm just fascinated by this. The House Elementary and Secondary Education Committee is going to have a special meeting coming up on September the 10th, and that is going to be next Tuesday. And this is these issues of child care payments issued by DESE. And I've read the press release. Speaker Plocker is very clear on this. They've made historic investments, he says, in public education. He wants answers. Chairman Pollitt says he understands DESE is working on the issue. Two different responses there. Plocker saying, look, we've given you all this money. Pollitt not quite saying that. What do you see happening at that hearing? And is Carla Essinger going to face some tough questions?
Oh, there's going to be tough questions. I mean, look. It'd be like whoever takes over the Cardinals next. You're taking over a mess. I mean, there's no definition of good that the Cardinals are, and there's no definition of good that DESE is right now. It's struggling. It's on its knees. I mean, let's just be honest. Even your longtime supporters of public education, a Mike Henderson, a Rick Francis, even they have major issues with DESE. Carl Esslinger has inherited a terrible mess. And part of it is they can't even cut the checks. And I know a little bit about this. You have a group that's come in and look, they changed this over and put it under DESE, which I'm not sure in hindsight the wisdom of putting more under DESE right now, but that's what the legislature did, or the executive branch together. They moved these payments. They can't even get the checks cut. I hear from the people that work for the company that is actually over the processing. They can't even retrain the employees because they only work like in the office a day or two a week. Then they do that thing where they work from home, which AKA doesn't work at all. And so it is. I mean, Carl Esslinger, if you think the fire department's putting out fires every day, try being Carl Esslinger. Do I think Carla has dug in, and do I think she's going to get these checks cut? Do I think some of these checks are going to get cut prior to that hearing? Yes. But good on Brad and good on Representative Pollitt and good on Speaker Plocker for having this hearing, because I promise you, the way the bureaucracy works is you put a line in the sand and say, we're going to have questions September 10th. The bureaucracy complies, and it actually does what you're looking for. And there's a lot of issues in this bureaucracy that need addressed.
I want to follow up on that. I think this is really a big deal, and the media will report on it because this is a big deal. You said something very interesting. You said that there are DESE employees only working 1 or 2 days a week in the office, and explain that again, and then these checks not being cut.
Well, we've all seen it in different places. Not at the Missouri Times. If you want paid, you show up to work. Sure. But in places that say, you can work from home, quote unquote, 2-3 days a week, and you work in the office 2 days a week. Well, work's done in the office. You don't get as much done at home as you do there. Now, we'd all like to be able to just gallivant all day and get paid, but there's a lot of that. Well, I'd say there's a lot of there's a reason that the executive branch turns over every 8 years. And part of that reason is you do need some fresh blood. And letting major high-level employees in charge of cutting these checks work from home doesn't work. I think we've seen that. I don't think you don't need an MBA at Mizzou to see that's just a bad idea and not going to work, and it hasn't. So, Carl, let's think, but it takes a minute to turn around a ship as big as Desi, that's as dysfunctional as Desi. You got to give a person more than 3 months. Now, I think like whatever fire's in front of her, she's putting out. She just got an entire department on fire, and it takes a while to turn that ship around. I think she'll get the checks cut, but you have these problems like folks not sure. I'll tell you this, Brett. Tuesday at high noon, 1 week from yesterday, I have got information that one of the department heads was at a DEI conference. Now, there are some folks that love DEI, and I'm not here to quarrel with them, but the entire Republican Party, from the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, senators, have all said, we're not doing DEI in this state. Well, there's one department they didn't tell that to. So I made a clue board, and I've been sunshine requesting and scratching off who was where June 5th. And DEI Detective Scott Faughn's going to announce on Tuesday either no one was or one of the departments is just neck deep in DEI. And again, I'm not here to tell you DEI is good or bad. I think it's not. But I respect you if you like that sort of thing. But when you have the department just flying the bird right in the face of the governor's office, lieutenant governor, legislature, you need to shake that tree. And I think that's just a natural, healthy. I bet you Randy knows the quote from Thomas Jefferson about the tree of liberty is refreshed with the blood of patriots. Well, sometimes you need some churn, and the executive branch probably at this point could use a little churn.
Yeah, a little shake-up never hurts. I mean, I think bringing in some fresh blood and new ideas. I think it's a human tendency, unless you are checked by others or you invite that checking by others, or some are self-regulating, you get complacent, right? And you get comfortable. And
I think it's true in everywhere.
Yeah. There's a bench trial scheduled for today over the fair ballot language for Amendment 3, that abortion language. What are your thoughts about that whole issue, Scott? I mean, I know it's a contentious issue. We get texts. People don't want to talk about it. But, I mean, after all, it's going to be on the ballot. And many people, that will be what they see is that language, Where's your predictions on this?
Ballot language only matters in particularly close elections. I don't think this is going to be particularly close enough for the ballot language to matter.
Okay.
I've not seen anything different to let me think Missouri is going to be different than Ohio and Texas.
Yeah.
I also think the Missouri pro-life cause is so divided and just bitter and fractious. Yeah. I don't know, if they can win this, then I'm wrong, and they're bulletproof tigers. The scoreboard matters more than our opinions or our feelings.
Well,
but I've not seen anything that shows this is going to be that close.
Yeah, according to the polls, I think it appears as though that the aye votes seem to be gaining steam and momentum. The latest polling I saw. So yeah, maybe you're just saying.
And they have a $3 million. I just saw almost $4 million put in.
Wow.
To run the campaign. Believe it or not, it's going to be more. It's going to be easier to buy television this fall than it was this summer. Mm-hmm. You'll really just have Hawley Kuntz buying ads. So I guess I'd love to see Amendment 3 go down. I'd love to see everybody come back to the table and do a couple. Get the law closer to where the public is, but still very pro-life, which I think is where the public is. I've not seen the things you need to see to show that Amendment 3, the opposition to Amendment 3 is congealed and funded and ready to go. Yeah. If that happens, no one will be happier than me, but I just, to be honest with you, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
it's close enough ballot language matters.
I couldn't agree with you more. It just seems like the enemy of best is better sometimes, or the enemy of better is best, and that seems to be where we're going. Scott, always enjoy talking to you. Glad we had our Scott Faughn fix for the week. We'll look forward to another one next week.
Talk to you on Monday.
All right, take care.
Thank
there
you,
is
Scott
Faughn. Yeah, I think that's a spot on.
That's unfortunate.
You know, I didn't get any coffee on the way in, and I'm catching up. What's up?
Okay, well, on that note, the internet often dupes us here on the show. And when I say often, I mean...
I'm raising my hand.
Every once in a blue moon. Hey, it happens to the best of us.
It happens to everyone, yeah.
More
and more.
Yeah, the brand Capri Sun just duped a lot of people on the internet, and they had to come out and set the record straight.
What?
So, of course, Capri Sun, they come in the little, like, Kool-Aid-looking pouches where you stab it with the skinny little straw.
Yeah, the youngins love that stuff.
Yeah, kids love it. I didn't realize this. The company's been around for over 5 decades.
No.
Yeah. Capri Sun, 55-year-old company.
Wow. Huh. I didn't realize
They recently made an announcement that they will be launching 12-ounce plastic bottles of Capri Sun. And that's all the TikTok users needed to go, oh, my God, they're getting rid of the Capri Sun pouches, the iconic Capri Sun pouches. It went mega viral on TikTok. Capri Sun had to come out and say, whoa, 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 whoa. The pouches aren't going anywhere. The plastic bottles will be a separate item that is available so y'all can cool your jets.
I was so worried over that. When
I know.
When you posted this story on the show page, on our prep page, I thought, I don't know. I lost sleep last night over it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But this is expanding their offering, right? Yeah. So that the kids use the pouch, 6 ounces. And then if you're an adult and you like this and you want to share the goodness with your kid and sort of connect that way, you get a 12-ounce bottle.
Which
More
still
plastic.
isn't a lot.
And all the greenies are going crazy. More plastic to John, when all of the tensions erupted after that episode outside of a bar down in Columbia, in the heart of the city, where a couple of, I think they were either returning from duty or off. I guess they were returning to the station near the end of their shift. But a couple of officers basically got involved in a scuffle where a guy was apprehended, had a difficult time restraining him. Remember that whole deal?
Oh yeah.
And during that discussion
with the department.
Yeah. And during that discussion, I remember a lot of discussion about the police review board, the Columbia Police Review Board, and what it's and basically the extent of the scope of its power and the scope of its ability to look into things and sort of indirectly manage the department. Remember, that was sort of the back and forth as far as the high level view I remember. Well, last night at the city council meeting, the CPRB, this review board, will no longer be able to host public meetings and educational programs for Columbia residents and the police department. They'll no longer be able to, this is according to our news partner, ABC News 17, they will no longer be able to review and make recommendations to the police chief and city manager on police policies, procedures, and trainings, except to the extent such recommendations may be related to findings of or complaints of alleged misconduct involving excessive use of force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, or use of offensive language. Well, isn't that what they allege all cops do at every stop? I mean, some of the members of a board, some of the basically defund the police, eradicate the police are evil, the police hate every citizen, and they're out there to hurt people, right? I mean, there are those radicals in the community. So
and those were the allegations that were leveled several times by that members of that board.
But I mean, it seems as though the exceptions, okay, they can't review and make recommendations to the police chief and city manager on policies, procedures, and trade, except related to findings on complaints of alleged misconduct involving excessive use of force, abuse of authority, well, that to me seems like there's no throttling back on them. That's their out, because every interaction with a police officer could be alleged to be an abuse of authority, profiling, discourtesy, use of offensive language. I mean, they can no longer conduct audits or reviews of the records of the police department for compliance with the requirements of the article of that's Senate Bill 754.
Yeah, that was a new legislation reference.
That states that
public boards,
civilian review boards established by political subdivisions shall solely be limited to reviewing, investigating, making findings, and recommending disciplinary action against law enforcement officers. I don't know this. I'm not sure that this seems like sort of a distinction without a difference, without a distinction without a difference.
Well, two things I'd say. Number one, quite frankly, I don't think it's all that newsworthy right now. I mean, unless there's something in here I'm missing. I think the GoComo and the capital improvement reimposement of the sales tax, that's what I focused on our website, quite frankly, Randy, are more newsworthy. Now, we could get the mayor on at some point, and maybe there's something in there. But I think I've read the memo, and I've seen the news reports, and it is controversial because of what has happened before. But one thing that's in that memo that I haven't seen any media report is into Carlin Seawood's budget. He briefly referenced it, very briefly. I didn't know, because we didn't have any notes. We didn't have a budget in front of us when he delivered the budget message back in late July. But he's proposed a new position in his office to add an assistant city manager to focus on public safety services in the city. If that's approved, we won't know that until 2 weeks. I have a feeling that the position will be approved. But that person, man or woman, we don't know, will officially be the liaison to the Columbia Police Review Board and would become, according to Mr. Seawood, a major part of coordinating oversight functions. I think that's why I'm kind of holding off on this. I saw what the TV did, and the papers have written about it as well. I think there were two other issues last night that were more newsworthy. But let's see what happens when they add this position, and maybe Seawood would be a good guess. But that, to me, is the bigger story. Once this person is in, that person is going to be, and this is straight out of the packet, will become an integral part. This is a direct quote, will become an integral part of coordinating oversight functions, end of quote. That is interesting. Not necessarily that's going to be all they do, but it is, it's going to be a new city manager.
I don't know. Maybe the intent of this Senate bill statewide and now the translation to the city charter or the city rules are intended to send the message that, hey, we're going to throttle you back. You guys can make your comments and you can investigate things, but you're not going to determine policy, nor can you just go fishing and look at review records just for the purpose of looking for a problem, which I think that I clearly read in the new statute, if you will, the new ordinance.
And I think the key is the new ordinance rather than
the revised city code.
Exactly, but the bill that's being discussed right now. But Mr. Seawood has said in his packet that person would also serve as a conduit for internal review of police policies, procedures, and training, as well as additional community outreach.
Well, the other thing
that's again, the budget hasn't been approved yet, so I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I think it will be in there, but again, the council could come back and say no when they vote on this in 2 weeks. My sense is that this position will probably be approved.
It's interesting. I mean, from a First Amendment, civil liberty, let the people speak and be heard point of view, I think it's interesting that the CPRB will be limited in their ability to host public meetings. So they can't really foment a bunch of, they can have the meeting before the meeting. Hey, we're having a public meeting here. Come and hang out with us and, air your grievances against the police department. I'm glad that sort of open season on police is going to be, and I mean that rhetorically in the meeting sense, will be throttled back. So,
what about the devil's advocate side of the question? I think some of the Wake Up family members out there might say, does the city need to come in with an assistant city manager to have oversight of a technically volunteer review board that shouldn't cost the city anything?
Yeah, and people are going to weigh in on that. We haven't really gotten into that, and I haven't done a whole lot on that other than talk about it this morning, John, because the position hasn't been approved yet. But this is what the sentence I think is the key. This is pretty vague. It says it would add an assistant city manager with the express purpose of providing a focus on public safety services within the city. End of quote. Again, DeCarlin briefly referenced this during his State of the City, but I was there for it. I know he didn't go into a lot of detail, and I don't remember at all him linking this with the Columbia Police Review Board. So we'll see what happens on that. I think, let's put it this way. When Jeff Jones was the police chief, you remember, Randy, I think you had him on. Brandon was here. We had him on. He said something on this show that I'll never forget. He would not tell me who. I asked if it was Pat Fowler. He would not say. But he felt like he was treated very unfairly by at least one member of the city council. And definitely, we've had Matt Nichols on. Nichols has said that some of these police review board members, and they change over, some of them quit, et cetera. So, the board has had meetings. Sometimes they don't. But Matt Nichols and some of the supporters of the police have felt like this police review board has been disrespectful to former chief. I don't know that they've been disrespectful to Schluty, but definitely they felt like they were disrespectful to Chief Jones. So we'll see. I do think worth mentioning, bigger than this, at least newsworthy right now, because that was what was approved last night, the reimposition of the capital improvement sales tax. That was overwhelmingly approved. Proposition 1 in August. That's going to generate about $83 million. Bethel and Green Meadows will be a huge part of that. And then Clark Lane is just that turn where you make the turn into Dollar General and Lighthouse Car Wash. There's no turn lane. There's constantly traffic jams in there, and then people they're backed up. You've got sidewalks that really aren't very good, and then you're going to have the interstate project coming through there. That's a pretty big deal. But I understand what you're saying about this potentially being newsworthy. Well, I would push back on it, though. Let's see what happens if they approve this position for the assistant city manager. And John's asking a very good question. Do we even need another assistant city manager?
I met with DeCarlin Seawood last week, had a nice meeting with him. Good. He's going to be with us. We're working out to where he can be with us regularly. Good. And, you talk to the man and you meet with him, you get a different perspective on things. And for everyone, and I think that's true of everyone that we like to talk with. We talk about them. We talk and then we rarely have a conversation with them and discuss their perspective on things. He invites that, and so we're going to take him up on that, and we're going to have discussions with him.
Good.
We'll ask, and we both agreed we're going to ask some of the tough questions, and he's going to answer them. So to his credit, and it was a delightful meeting, had a great meeting, and I won't, we'll just that's just a little preview of coming attractions. Now,
that's awesome. Good to hear.
Okay, and I think the reason I bring this potential throttling back, but you're right, depends how it all works out in the process, of citizens hammering on the police.
Sure.
Just from my perspective, listening to what Matt Nichols has said over and over, and what you hear everyday police officers talk about it too, they just want respect. They just want to have, it's like, hear our side of the story. And we want a little respect rather than the constant enabling of hammering on the part of city officials by citizens who really don't know what they're talking about. They haven't rode with us. They haven't encountered that with us. And I'm channeling Matt Nichols here, okay? But I just think this whole is under that umbrella of let's give a little respect and not assume that every cop walks out of his door every morning to profile people and hurt them and abuse them and be discourteous. I just don't believe that's the truth, and I think they just want to be recognized for that. Okay,
Jack,
before we leave,
said that.
Jack says real quick, why aren't y'all talking about the real reason for free buses? It's keeping homeless off the streets during hours of operation.
Well, that is they have the money to do it, and DeCarlin Seawood, when he comes on with us, he has made it very clear he wants more people to ride the bus. They don't have. I mean, you're looking, if they charge fares, about $400,000 is what they'd be able to come up with. I don't have the exact amount because the city their budget itself is about $7 million, but it's probably let's say $2 million ballpark to do this. Yeah. They have the funding to do it. It'd be a state grant. It'd be a federal grant, but the city would push back on what he's saying about they want homeless people to, because there are bus drivers that really don't want bus drivers. A couple of them told Morgan Burish on the record at Channel 17, who did a Enterprise story on this last week, that some of the homeless people are riding it nonstop. Some of them don't want it. But DeCarlin Seawood has made it very clear he wants more people to ride the bus. I think it's probably going to be one more year. I don't know that they have any money after that to do it. They have a Federal Transit Administration grant, a state operating grant. And in regard to his question, why haven't we talked about it? I've been reporting on it since 5:30 this morning.
Yeah. I know you have.
It's on our website, and I linked to the report, so I'm not sure if
I think Jack is trying to be funny.
Yeah, yeah. As to the new law on police review board, didn't you like the way State Rep, this is from listener Dale, State Rep Tyson Smith said Columbia could just ignore the law, quote, it doesn't apply to us, close quote. I haven't heard David Tyson Smith say that.
I haven't heard that either, although I do know that he has definitely been, I've talked to him on the record. He's been critical of the police, and he believes we need a police review board, but I've not heard that.
I think we need a representative and a lawyer review board and a McDonald's worker review board, and let's review reporters and let's review producer Hannah. I'm getting so tired of everyone reviewing everyone. Would you just all do your job and do it well? Whew. Back with John in a minute.
This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
When I think about players taking a knee during the national anthem, I think that the very thing that they're taking a knee on, I think is not being taken in consideration. I think everyone's kind of focusing on the flag and the national anthem opposed to what's really the cause of why he's taking a knee.
What do you think of the NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem? I think the cause behind it is true, but I don't like the execution of it.
I think about NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem? I don't think that's the right forum to take a knee. I think there's a lot of issues that needs to be addressed. I don't know that particular forum is the right one to do that.
What do I think about NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem? I think there's better ways to make a point, make a statement. Maybe use some of your millions of dollars you spend on mansions and cars and actually put it towards a cause. Use your time and effort in changing something. I don't think kneeling on a field is going to change anything except be divisive.
What do I think about the NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem? It's a form of peaceful protest. I think they're open to do, whatever they would like to do. So, they're just viewed in a higher standard than everybody because of the platform that they play on, and I don't feel like that's completely fair to them being able to use their freedom of speech.
What do I think of the NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem? Protest.
Before the Grand Slam wraps up this weekend, it's called the Honey Deuce. It's become a major success for Grey Goose in the tournament. Traces its roots back to 2007 when Grey Goose was in its second year of the vodka sponsorship with the U.S. Open. And it's been extended for another 5 years. The guy said he saw a honeydew and said, "That's the taste of summer." Cocktail mixes Grey Goose vodka, lemonade, and a splash of Chambord raspberry liqueur, topped off with 3 honeydew balls that look like tennis balls. And so far, they've sold 460,275 honeydews at the Billie Jean King Tennis Center. 10 million in sales. They even have taps with the batch cocktail mix ready to go. So we grabbed the bar menu from the U.S. Open. Let's see, 25-ounce Michelob Ultra, $17. Corona Premier, $11. A pimento cheese sandwich, $12. And this one, the Honeydew, $22, but you get a commemorative plastic cup to keep. Now you know the rest of that story. $8 to $9 for a Bud or a Bud Light at Old Mizzou.
To put a
Well, I was going to say this cocktail sounds amazing. This sounds right up my alley. I love flavored vodkas or like vodka lemonades, so I might have to try this one.
There you go. Make it at home.
Yeah.
Cut out the middleman.
Vodka, Chambord, and what else?
Lemonade, vodka, and Chambord.
Yep.
With 3 tennis ball shaped melon balls thrown in.
This sounds so good, like simple, refreshing for sort of summertime. I think I'm going to try this, actually. I know what I'm doing this weekend.
Will there be, thanks for that, John. You always have to wet our whistle for what is left of summer. There you go. Will they be serving?
And if you're, if you're backing off at the price or all, think about your standard upscale restaurant, even in mid-Missouri. If you go to, you're going to pay $15 for a call drink. With name brand booze anyway.
True. Do you get call liquor in your cocktails? I tend not to, with rare exceptions.
What does that mean?
You use the well stuff or the call stuff?
The former bartender in me says, beware of what they're passing off as call liquor.
Oh, no, John.
Because the industry, not that it would ever happen, has been known to refill bottles.
Do we need a local bar review board? We've had some listeners, 2 listeners simultaneously texted us.
I think that's called the ATC, isn't it?
Yeah, no kidding.
Dale says we need a committee together to see about the feasibility of having a review board that reviews the review board. And Evan said the same thing.
We'll take it under review.
There we go. We'll take it under review. Yeah. Will they be serving any of that of the honeydew, cocktail at the Lakeside Ashland debate watch party next Tuesday evening?
Oh, I'm not sure, but we'll have to talk to them and see if that's a possibility.
For less than a is it that Zack Smith doesn't do? Welcome in, Zack.
Good to be with you this morning, Randy. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, so I see that concerning Jack Smith, not your brother, and his prosecution in the J6 interference deal, he's taking a different tack. First, he's modified his indictment on the heels of the SCOTUS immunity decision, and then yesterday reported that he's not being as aggressive on the timeline. What does that tell us? What's going on?
Well, look, Randy, I always start out Jack Smith, no relation to me, Zack Smith. Different people, completely different views on many, many things, I'm sure. But look, even though Jack Smith, is now saying he may not be as aggressive, I think it's pretty clear from the actions he's taken in this case and the actions he's taken appealing the Mar-a-Lago documents case, the dismissal of that indictment there, that he intends to keep moving full steam ahead with both of these cases. In terms of amending the indictment, the Washington, D.C. case, which involves the January 6th actions, some of Donald Trump's other actions in the wake of the 2020 election, it's clear that Jack Smith is trying to keep this case alive in the wake of the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. Typically, when a prosecutor amends an indictment, supersedes an indictment, that's bad news for a defendant because it means typically that additional charges are being brought against that defendant. That's not what happened here. What happened here, Jack Smith cut out some factual allegations that the Supreme Court said basically he couldn't use in the prosecution. He made it clear in his view that many of Donald Trump's actions were taken in his personal or political capacities instead of in his official capacity as president. And so we'll have to wait and see what Judge Tanya Chutkan does in that case. She has a status hearing set for tomorrow, September 5th. That'll be the first time we really get to see all of the parties back in court after the very momentous Supreme Court's immunity ruling. And so there will be a lot to watch and see this week as we kind of wait to see how the judge reacts to Jack Smith's latest steps and what next steps Jack Smith may take in these cases as well.
So, Zack, if you put yourself in the shoes of Donald Trump's defense team, well, I guess both sides. I mean, it seems as though the Supreme Court said to the lower court, hey, you have to decide what he did as to which bucket it falls in. Was it an official presidential act? Was it a political act? But if you're the defense team, couldn't you claim, if I was writing a brief for Zack's schooling of me, mentoring as the law student aspirant, wouldn't you claim, well, wait a minute, he was just defending constitutional right to challenge an election where it was different circumstances, COVID was on, blah, blah, blah. Aren't they going to try to make everything in that bucket of presidential? I mean, and who ultimately determines whether it was presidential or whether it was political and personal?
Randy, you get a gold star on your legal homework, as always. It's an excellent point, and one that I think Donald Trump's lawyers are likely to raise. And ultimately, in the first instance, it will be Judge Tanya Chutkan, the district court judge there. I suspect if they get an adverse ruling on which bucket Donald Trump's actions fall into, you may see that being appealed back up to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Eventually, may ask the Supreme Court to take that case again. Don't forget, though, the Supreme Court, in that immunity ruling, said that the president presumptively enjoys immunity for official actions. And an example they gave is they said when Donald Trump was talking to Justice Department lawyers, he was absolutely immune for that conduct. That couldn't be used against him. Jack Smith cut that out of the indictment. The Supreme Court said he was likely immune for conversations he had with Vice President Mike Pence about whether or not to certify the election. And yet the court said they were going to leave it to the lower federal courts to decide that question finally in the first instance. So you'll certainly see legal wrangling over that point as well. The other important thing to keep in mind, Randy, is that Judge Chutkan in the Washington, D.C. case hasn't addressed the issue of whether Jack Smith was constitutionally appointed. Keep in mind, that's the basis on which Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida dismissed the classified documents case, that indictment against Donald Trump, and yet that hasn't been briefed in Washington, D.C. Now, I suspect the reason Donald Trump's lawyers haven't brought that up in the D.C. case yet is that the case law in the D.C. circuit is much less favorable to the Trump team than it was in the 11th Circuit, which oversees the classified documents case. But that issue likely needs to be addressed in the D.C. case as well. And so, like I said, there's a whole lot of legal wrangling that still needs to take place. But I think it appears that Jack Smith is still planning to move full speed ahead, regardless of the election. And he's even said in the past, regardless of the outcome of the election, he said even if Donald Trump wins, his team will plan to continue pursuing these charges up through until Inauguration Day, which I think really is very troubling in many aspects.
Any traction to the maneuvering we're seeing from some of the anti-Trumpers to have Judge Cannon removed from the case in its entirety?
No, I think that is nonsense. Look, Judge Cannon's order dismissing the classified documents case against Donald Trump, saying that Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed, was a very well-done order. Judge Cannon's position was supported by briefing and scholarship from several prominent legal scholars. Former Attorney General Ed Meese, the namesake of my center at the Heritage Foundation, former Attorney General Michael Mukasey, who himself was a federal judge in New York for almost 20 years, they urged Judge Cannon to make that ruling that Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed. Don't forget, too, that Justice Clarence Thomas in the Trump immunity case essentially asked the lower court judges to resolve that issue. He thought it was potentially an issue in the case and said that lower court judges should pay attention to it and should address it if asked to do so. And, of course, Judge Cannon shortly thereafter did rule on that very issue. And so, look, I think what is happening here is many on the left are unhappy that Judge Cannon is holding Jack Smith's feet to the fire, is making very difficult rulings, is appropriately castigating the special prosecutor's office in instances where they haven't been forthcoming, in instances where they have not essentially done what they needed to do. And so I think that's a good thing. And I think all of this, unfortunately, many of the criticisms of Judge Cannon are in line with the criticisms of the federal judiciary that we have seen from the left, where they try to undermine the legitimacy of the judge in a particular case, where they try to undermine the legitimacy of the institutions if they simply don't like the rulings that the judges on those courts are giving them.
That's the Saul Alinsky approach to judicial critique, right? Attack the person rather than what they do. Okay, well, speaking of judges and attacking them because I don't like what they do, okay, guilty as accused. Judge Juan Merchan, I mean, I think it could be fairly said when his daughter is a major fundraiser and intricately involved with Democrat politics. He's conducted an interesting trial up there in New York City. And he's got a decision to make on September 18th. I mean, and we're in the middle of a heated campaign. What is the proper thing to do? What is the right thing to happen here? And on the other hand, are you willing to predict what he may do, whether it's proper or not?
Well, I always joke, Randy, my crystal ball is broken these days. I've learned to get out of the prediction business. There's a good reason. I'm not a gambler. I would never win anything, I'm sure. But look, I think Judge Juan Merchan has had many off-ramps to kind of stop this farce of a trial from taking place in New York, and yet he hasn't taken any of those. And I want to be clear, the criticisms of Judge Juan Merchan in New York and Judge Eileen Cannon are apple and oranges. Many of the left are criticizing Judge Cannon because they don't substantively like the rulings that she has made. Many of the criticisms about Judge Merchan and his handling of this case stem from an apparent conflict of interest that Judge Merchan has. Keep in mind, he gave money to the Biden campaign and other Democratic causes, a very small amount, but still. Judges are supposed to be impartial, and that certainly doesn't seem impartial to me. His daughter is benefiting financially. So those are many of the criticisms around Judge Merchan and his handling of the case. Now, in terms of what will happen, I don't know what will happen in September 18th. Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney there, has recently indicated that he would not oppose kind of prolonging the sentencing process, which is a different position than his office has taken in the past. And so I think it's pretty clear that if Judge Merchan chooses to move forward with this sentencing later this month, he'll be doing so really on his own. And of course, if he were to sentence Donald Trump to some type of home confinement or even incarceration, which is certainly on the table, although it should not be for a number of reasons, we would really be in unprecedented territory. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens.
That's interesting. You've written about Alvin Bragg and other rogue prosecutors in your book, Rogue Prosecutors, about the Soros lawyers. Soros prosecutors, Soros-backed prosecutors. So it's interesting.
If I can,
sure.
If I can, Randy, quickly, I'll put in a shameless plug. A couple of weeks ago, I had an op-ed highlighting Kamala Harris and her ties to the progressive prosecutor movement. Stay tuned. I put out, should come out this week, actually, a more in-depth, a lengthier white paper that Heritage will publish, really outline Kamala Harris's radical rogue policies in the criminal justice space, and specifically highlighting how her time as district attorney in San Francisco really in many ways served as a blueprint for the progressive prosecutor movement that we have today. So stay tuned for that for your listeners who may be interested.
Yeah, and when we talk again, we'll have to unpack that even further after we've had a chance to digest it. Moving to a different subject, and this is a touchy one because producer Hannah keeps hoping and hoping and hoping that maybe, even though she's principled and realizes it's not truly the right thing to do, she would not deny a little debt relief.
And I was promised that it would be happening.
Several of the states have sued Biden after they've won on the save provisions of his order, and now they're doing it again. Tell us about that?
Well, all I can say, producer Hannah, is do you mean Joe Biden or Kamala Harris were less than forthcoming about what actions they would take in office? I'm shocked. Or promised things they knew they couldn't deliver. I can't believe it.
The disrespect.
Well, look, I know. Well, look, this is part of an ongoing saga. The Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has tried multiple times to unilaterally forgive billions upon billions of dollars of student loan debt, ostensibly for political purposes, to try to persuade, debtors who owe that money to essentially vote for them in the upcoming election. That's what I would presume they're trying to do with this. But the U.S. Supreme Court, other federal courts have repeatedly told them they don't have the authority to do this. We've seen this administration time and time again trying to stretch the law beyond the breaking point in many areas. Think back to the eviction moratorium that happened during COVID, where they essentially used tried to use a statute to impose a broad moratorium on landlords not being able to evict tenants even if they didn't pay their rent in many instances. This is along those same lines. And once the Supreme Court struck down their initial effort in this space, they essentially pointed to a different statute and said, no, that statute the Supreme Court said didn't give us authority to do that. Actually, we're going to use this different statute instead. And so this most recent effort has been meeting with the same fate. Federal courts have looked at this, said the Biden-Harris administration doesn't have the power to do this, and essentially they're acting without any lawful authority. And so while I'm sure this would be a vastly popular policy, it's one that the current administration does not have the power to unilaterally enact.
And it impacts, it has reach here into Missouri. Our Attorney General Bailey said in a statement, we successfully halted their first two illegal student loan cancellation schemes. I have no doubt we'll secure yet another win. So I don't know. These people just keep knocking at the door at the federal level, trying to just give some people, other people's money. And the courts keep saying, no. We'll see where it goes.
Right.
Zach, as always, thanks for filling in the very deep blanks that the law process will provide for us. And you fill those gaps in nicely. Make it all make sense. Thanks for all you do. And we look forward to our next conversation.
I always enjoy chatting with you guys. Thanks so much for having me on this morning.
All right. Zach Smith with Heritage. You can read the stuff that Zach writes, including this upcoming white paper on heritage.org. His book is a great read, although it'll get you frustrated. You'll want some of that, what is it called, a honeydew cocktail that Hannah's thinking about when you read it. We'll be back with the market report. Stay tuned. The industrial slid more than 600 points. The NASDAQ down 3.25%, almost 600 points. The S&P down 2% yesterday. It was big, mostly on the shoulders of NVIDIA. Why? Apparently, the Justice Department has filed some subpoenas. No one knows, or I don't know what that's all about, but the chip market was down yesterday. In addition, in the last few days, first Home Depot, then Dollar General, now Dollar Tree, all trimming their projections for forecasts for earnings in the next year. So what's going on here? Why is that? What is driving this negativity when Walls and Harris and all the surrogates were on the talking head shows on Sunday saying this economy is beautiful. Look at the market. Look at people's real wages have gone up in the last year. Look at the jobs we've created. Well, activity in U.S. factories was slower than expected in August, says the Institute for Supply Management. They reported that yesterday. The markets followed. The manufacturing index came at 47% for the month, up 0.4 percentage points from the July reading, but below the Dow Jones forecast and their expectations. So, of course, whether it's earnings or whether it's manufacturing indices, whether it's jobs, whether it's CPI, when it doesn't meet the market expectations, especially in a negative way, when it's underperforming, that's when you see the market respond.
I saw one of the talking heads bring up the trade imbalance, too, with the Chinese as potentially having a reason why the chip market is so volatile at the
Volkswagen looking at closing some plants, some EV plants in Germany, and the unions are out of their mind. They're going crazy over there. Why? China dumping EVs on the market because they can do it. They've got the market cornered on the precious metals that it takes. The labor is cheap there, and so if you like communism, buy more of those Chinese EVs. Today's futures really. Thankfully, it doesn't look like Groundhog Day so far. The futures are just down fractions of a percent. Oil plummeted yesterday, now at $70 a barrel. Isn't that something? Wow. You want a little happy news? When we come back, I got to play an old and well-worn, but it holds so much power, Reagan joke. Stay tuned.
Has America been fair to Donald Trump?
interesting to see what happens. I think he's done a good job of doing more policy and less personal attacking, which is good to see. I mean, he can't help himself go there occasionally. But, that'll be interesting to see if he does push back on some of the handout policies. Kamala's going to be in New Hampshire today talking about $50,000 up from $5,000 tax deduction for startup small businesses. And it appears as though that applies, John, to the stuff that's before you enter the business, before you actually open the doors, consulting and pre-opening
writing
marketing.
A business plan and all that stuff. Yeah.
So what's it going to do to the cost of those things? It's going to make them go skyrocketing high, just like tuition and healthcare. When the government mandates and either pays for it or mandates that someone else pay for it, that's what happens, right? Or am I wrong?
What happens? Are there any parameters built in if you do all that stuff and took the Fed money up front and your business doesn't make it? Do you owe it all back?
Is that the case? I guess
I don't know.
Maybe it's a loan. It's a tax deduction. So yeah, it's a tax deduction that she's proposing. So
you just wonder about all the buts.
Yeah, you wonder about the buts. Well, it's not all doom and gloom. You have to. At one point, I'm getting to that point in the season where instead of getting frustrated and angry over stuff and the shenanigans that they try to pull on us and the pandering that they do and the gratuitous new policies that come out of nowhere just to try to appeal to whatever group they're speaking to, you got to have fun just as an observer. Think of it as sport. Go. The Chiefs open tomorrow night, right? Okay, it's sport. You go watch the Chiefs, and if they lose, they lose. If they win, they win. But it's sport. You watch it. Here's a great one, and I think there's actually more than a few yucks about what Ronald Reagan said with this little bit.
Did you hear the story about the kid who was outside the Democratic fundraiser selling kittens? When the people came out from the fundraiser, he was holding up the kittens and he was saying, "Buy a Democrat kitten." Well, a couple of weeks later, the Republicans held a fundraiser in the same place. And when they came out, there was the same kid with the kittens. And he said, "Buy a Republican kitten." And one of the members of the press who'd seen him there 2 weeks before said, "Wait a minute, kid. You were selling these kittens the last time as Democrat kittens. How come the Republican kittens now?" Kid says, "Because now they got their eyes open."
Oh, the kittens opened their eyes, and they went from Democrat kittens to Republican kittens. But we got plenty of listeners who would say that the same could be true if you had the first instance, the Republican kittens who opened their eyes as Democrats.
What was Reagan's old line about the economy? He said that recession is when your neighbor loses his job, depression is when you lose your job, and recovery is when Jimmy Carter loses his job.
Yeah, right.
I remember that one.
He was just so masterful, and he did it with a smile and sort of that disarming style of his. It was hard to get mad at Ronald Reagan because he was the happy warrior. I mean, and that was the beauty of him.
Well, he was very polished on the stump.
He literally knew how to speak directly to the people. And he did so in a way that I've never seen anything quite like it. But I also would say what people forget, he had enormous success as president. But Randy, he had a huge Democrat majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, many of whom were from the South and actually were conservative and helped really pass a law. Had all the Democrats stuck together, he wouldn't have gotten anything done, but he was able to persuade a lot of them. They used to call them the bull weevils. In Harold Volkmer and Ike Skelton were some of that a little bit, but then they opposed him on some other stuff too. Certainly national defense they supported. But Reagan had this fascinating, I thought, relationship with the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. And when Tip O'Neill was getting ready to retire, I watched a video not too long ago before this movie came out of Reagan speaking at a St. Patrick's Day dinner in an event. The Republican president speaking at this big dinner and the place was just loaded with Democrats, and he got a standing ovation. Tip O'Neill was the first person to stand up. I could make the argument. I couldn't forget making the argument. We can say it. Those two men saved Social Security and probably preserved it for 30 to 40 years. We're going to need to do something about it now, but just a lot of success, and I think that movie's going to be very interesting. I've not had a chance to see it yet, though.
Heard a lot of kudos for that movie, and it's interesting. It was actually a lot of the people on the left and a lot of the naysayers are saying that it was planned to come out now. The truth is there were a lot of obstacles they met. It was actually planned to come out a couple of years ago. It was really not meant to be a political statement in this political season. But I think it's going to be interesting to see whether there's any resonance between, that sort of jocular style that occasionally Trump can bring to the stump. I mean, after all, in his own way, Trump is entertaining and he can be disarming. When he comes out and does his little Trump dance, I mean, that's hilarious, right? I mean, can you see Kamala doing that? Can you see, Walz, he tried to dance onto the DNC stage. He looked like Mr. Magoo, frankly. But anyway, it's interesting to see.
The other thing that we should point out, now I don't know if that'll have any impact at all, the movie coming out on the presidential race, but Reagan came, it's very important to note here for young people, President Reagan won 2 elections in landslides. The electorate has changed significantly since then. Our nation, I believe, was much more conservative in those days. I can tell you at the Mizzou campus, a lot of the students were Republican openly. There were tons of them at that time. But Reagan, this is the last thing I'd say about that. Reagan came here to Columbia, 1987. He spoke at Fairview High School. Some of our listeners may remember this. He also went to Hickman High School. Sam Donaldson yelled out, Mr. President, how does it feel to be a CUPE? He gave a great answer and somehow tied it in with the Sandinistas, but it was an amazing answer. But I'll never forget President Reagan and Bill Bennett, Secretary of Education, coming out of that plane, and they stopped as they were going to go down the steps, and they stopped and looked, and they wanted to make sure Harold Volkmer, the Democratic congressman from Hannibal that represented Columbia at that time, they wanted him to come down and get the recognition. He made sure, and Harold Volkmer and Reagan didn't agree on a lot of stuff. Volkmer was very pro-labor. Obviously, Mr. Reagan was not seen as pro-labor, although he got a lot of labor union votes. But it was just a different era. I tell the young people today, can you imagine now in this day and age, 2024, a Republican president flying on Air Force One and telling the Democratic congressman from that district, you go on out first? I mean, first of all, I don't know that they'd be on the same plane together. They'd both probably be primaried for it. Nobody thought anything of it in those days. Nobody said anything.
No, that's
and even the protesters were pretty respectful. They wanted him to, what they were saying basically, the protesters down on Broadway, is they wanted him to raise taxes on the rich.
Yeah,
that's really what they said.
That gambit is in play again, right? That maneuver is in play this election cycle, class warfare. It's a very effective, progressive, leftist, Marxist tool. If people would, though, absorb that, listen to that, and then look around them. Look at Venezuela. Mm-hmm. Look at Argentina. Look at the Soviet Union. Look at China. While China has its own deeply rooted economic problems because socialism never works. The control of or the confiscation of production and its output never works. But it's a popular political tool.
Yeah, and it is interesting. And when I say that they were talking about you need to raise taxes, that was their theme. And some of them actually protested his appearance when he spoke at the State Fair in Sedalia 40 years ago. And some of them said the same thing. But when I say protest, nothing like you'd imagine today. It was very respectful.
Holding signs, walking in circles around a square.
That's it.
Right.
But nobody, there was no altercations. Nobody, nobody got arrested. It was just a different era. I felt like it was a different era.
It makes my ADD mind think of that image of what we all know as First Amendment right to free speech and public association and so forth.
And they were there, and they had the right to be there.
Fine.
And nobody disputed them.
Think of the famous March on the Mall that led to the Martin Luther King thing. I mean, there was, as far as I know, there was no violence during that march.
Not.
Okay. And you contrast that with what happened after Trump's inauguration, with Madonna getting up there and saying she's thought about blowing up the White House. When you think about who's the actor that was talking about, have they ever assassinated a president? I mean,
I can't remember who
the
that
level.
was.
Oh, it was
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, I think it was maybe Johnny Depp. Yeah, you think of that and the kind of incendiary language that people use, burning the flag and somehow thinking that's going to make an impact for your cause, fighting police and rambunctiousness and invading buildings because you're unhappy with administration policy towards Israel. I mean, it just seems like there are no limits now to what is considered. And even the left reporters have stood in front of burning buildings back in 2020 saying peaceful protests.
Right. I think the gentleman said mainly a peaceful protest, but yes, that was as the buildings were burning behind him. But yes, I did see that. The country has changed. I grew up watching John Chancellor and Roger Mudd. On ABC, it was Frank Robinson's reporting was just totally underrated. You had Ann Compton. It was different. And the electorate has changed too. It's a lot more polarized than it was. Without the internet, I would argue the voters in those days were more informed than they are today. Yeah. I would argue they were, and there was more. I felt like there was more respect.
Well, in general.
There was more respect for each other.
And, I thought about what's been... Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say something we brought up during the DNC in 2024 was a hearkening back to the DNC in Chicago in 1968 and the riots and the Chicago Police Department clobbering people left and right live on national TV. So it wasn't all hearts and flowers.
No, it wasn't, and you're right. And and by the way, the mayor of Chicago at that time was a Democrat, and that was the Democrat of Daley, and he was kind of hardline pro-police. He didn't, and Dan Rather himself got beat up a little bit. But I would add also Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, when he was president, he spoke at the Hearn Center in Columbia. I don't know how many people remember it. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 1978, and Missouri had 10 congressional seats in those days, not 8 like now, 10. A lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats. William Clay Sr. was the only one that wasn't there. All the rest of them were there. Carter gave a long speech, very long, and it was about agriculture. I think he was talking to MFA, as I recall, that day. But he went out of his way to really praise each member by name and what they've done, including the Republicans. It just was a different era. Now you just don't see anything. Danforth got who at the time was really the head of for lack of a better term, the head of the Republican Party in Missouri. Jimmy Carter went out of his way to praise him. And Jimmy Carter had campaigned for Jerry Linton before he died in the plane crash. So that was a different era. John's right. There were protests in the 68, but that incident at the convention in 68 notwithstanding, it was just a little bit different. But that movie looks awfully good.
Well, we live in times that are tumultuous, that are, I think, very pivotal. And I just hope that people will weigh not only the specific policies, but the principles and the values behind them. Kamala Harris said her values haven't changed. How can we judge her values? That's, I think, the question for the American voters and the electorate to try to decipher in what is now we're looking at just a few short weeks. 60 days?
I mean, you guys are talking about Carter and the scrutiny that he came under. And when he came to mid-Missouri, he was still fighting the whole battle of the economy and all that sort of thing. But boy, immediately after that, it was his handling of the Iranian hostage crisis that ultimately took him out.
Yep. That paid that was. But when he spoke here in Columbia in '78, John, the hostages didn't happen until '79. But you're right. At that time, he had support, and Democrats did okay in the 1978 midterms, as I recall.
All you can say about Jimmy Carter is, though, he's a guy that even though politically it's hard to look
The officers went after him. Speed stopped 100 miles an hour, and he took off, and she crashed and died in the accident.
And leaves a large family behind, and it's just tragic.
And her husband was a deputy there as well.
Oh, my God. Just, well, hey, I didn't get a chance to report on it much, but there is a report out recommending that the legislature expand perinatal resources because we don't really fare well in terms of the mortality that accrues before, during, and after the delivery for up to a year. And so there's probably going to be some things you're going to be hearing about how to help moms, particularly a disparate representation among moms on Medicaid, because their rates are even much, much higher than the average rate, 2.5 times the ratio of white women, black women to white women. So we have to keep an eye on this. I know it's something near and dear to my heart. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this. I think if socioeconomic conditions improve for pregnant women, their men, whether they're married or not, and I think that there is more support internally because there's not so much economic devastation. I think that alone could make a big difference because a lot of these things are upstream. They don't start in the exam room when the blood pressure is taken or when the lab test is obtained. It's there's more going on here. So I hope that there's something that comes out of this to help moms and their babies going forward. Hannah, what do you got?
We have a lot of things that we need to mention that we have coming up this Saturday. Tiger Tailgate, another home football game for Mizzou football. I will be there this week.
Me too.
Yeah, you can check out the radio station's website to see where you can pick up your free tickets.
Neat.
Also on the radio station's website, the link to RSVP to our debate watch party next Tuesday night. All the details there as well.
All right, that'll wrap it up for a very busy Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for texting. Have a great day.
Bye.